2019, Ovidio Guzmán, the son of El Chapo, unleashed a war in the city of Culiacan to save his own life. And won. He humiliated a government, forcing it to release him. He became a legend. He believed he was untouchable, but the state never forgets a humiliation, and its revenge would come from the sky. This is the story of the hunt, the battle, and the fall of the heir who dared to challenge a country. October 17, 2019. Culiacan, Sinaloa. The afternoon sun hangs over a city about to descend into hell. In the exclusive Tres Rios neighborhood, an elite team of Mexican special forces surrounds a house. Their target, Ovidio Guzmán López, son of the legendary Joaquín El Chapo Guzman. What was supposed to be a precision strike against the Sinaloa Cartel transforms, in a matter of minutes, into the most humiliating show of force the Mexican government has suffered in decades. The cartel's response is not a defense, it's an invasion. Hundreds of sicarios, summoned by an invisible but lethal communication network, emerge from all over the city. These are not common gunmen, they are an army. Trucks mounted with .50 caliber machine guns, weapons capable of taking down helicopters seize the main avenues. The city is paralyzed by at least 19 strategic narco blockades, with burning vehicles sealing off all exits. This isn't chaos. It's a calculated strategy of narco-terrorism. The attacks spread throughout the city, revealing a terrifying, pre-established contingency plan. A commando unit storms the Oguaruto prison, freeing dozens of inmates to join the violence. But the cruelest and most effective blow is aimed at the military's residential complex. There, sicarios surround the soldiers' homes, taking their families hostage. The message is clear and brutal: the lives of your loved ones for the life of our boss. Inside the house, surrounded, Ovidio Guzmán picks up a phone. The soldiers record his desperate voice as he tries to stop the storm he has unleashed. "Stop everything," he pleads, "I've surrendered. I don't want any more of this mess." But the order has already been given. The power of Los Chapitos has been unleashed, and now it is the state that has its back against the wall, facing the threat of a civilian massacre, with the promise that more than 200 innocent people would die. The Mexican government breaks. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador makes an unprecedented decision. He personally orders Ovidio's release. The special forces, outgunned and betrayed by reality, withdraw. The state has been defeated. That day, known forever as Jueves Negro, Black Thursday, or the Culiacanazo, left at least 14 dead, including innocent civilians, and a nation in shock. More than just a failed operation, it was a psychological victory for the cartel. Los Chapitos not only demonstrated their firepower, but also their willingness to use the population as a weapon. They created a new myth, that of a criminal power that could bring an entire country to its knees, becoming idols for a new generation of criminals. To understand the magnitude of the power Ovidio Guzman commanded that day, one must look to his origins, which reveal a paradox. He was born in 1990 in the cradle of the narco world, Sinaloa, the son of El Chapo Guzman and his second wife, Griselda López Pérez. But his childhood was not spent in the mountains and poppy fields. He was raised in Mexico City, far from the epicenter of the family business. His father had other plans for him. Ovidio attended CEYCA, an exclusive Catholic school run by the Legionaries of Christ, an institution for the country's elite. He was the fresita, the preppy kid who was supposed to be a student, a professional, anything but a narco. His nickname, El Ratin, the Mouse, supposedly given to him by his father, seemed to allude to a low, elusive profile, far from the spotlight of the criminal empire. The family tried to build a wall between Ovidio and the destiny marked by his last name. But in the world of drug trafficking, blood is a sentence. The wall crumbled in 2008 with a tragic event that would change everything. His older brother, Edgar Guzman, was gunned down in Culiacan. Overnight, Ovidio, at just 18 years old, inherited his brother's criminal operations. It was not a choice driven by ambition, but an obligation imposed by death. His family's legacy, that gravitational force of violence and power, pulled him back. The reluctant prince was forced to claim a throne he never wanted. After their father's final capture and extradition, Ovidio and his brothers Ivan Archibaldo, Jesus Alfredo, and Joaquín were forced to consolidate their power. Known as Los Chapitos, Los Menores, or Los Juniors, they began to take the reins of a faction of the Sinaloa Cartel. At first, they followed the traditional model, investing in the purchase of marijuana in Mexico and cocaine in Colombia. But they were not the undisputed heirs. In 2016, their vulnerability was exposed when Ivan and Alfredo were kidnapped by a rival cartel. They had to be rescued thanks to negotiations by Ismael Elmayo Zomboda, their father's historic partner and leader of the cartel's old guard. This event, which should have forged an alliance of gratitude, became the prelude to a betrayal. Los Chapitos represented a new generation with a different criminal philosophy. Led by Ivan Archibaldo, whose ambition was to surpass his own father's legend, they adopted extreme violence as their main tool. They were more impulsive, more bloodthirsty, and much more public than Elmayo's generation. This clash of styles and generations was inevitable. The debt to Zomboda was forgotten, and soon a brutal internal war erupted. Los Chapitos versus La Maíza, Elmayo's faction, in a fight to the death for total control of the Sinaloa Cartel. It wasn't just a war for roots and territories. It was an ideological war for the soul of the cartel, pitting the old business model against a new era of terror and notoriety. ***, the economic engine that financed the Chapitos war and made them public enemy number one in the United States was a synthetic, cheap, and brutally lethal drug, fentanyl, and Ovidio Guzmán was the pioneer of this new, dark business. As early as 2014, he established the first clandestine fentanyl lab in Sinaloa, forever changing the paradigm of drug trafficking. The business model was one of ruthless efficiency. They imported chemical precursors from China and, in a network of at least 11 narco labs scattered across Sinaloa, produced thousands of kilos of methamphetamine and fentanyl per month. Their goal, according to US indictments, was to manufacture the most potent fentanyl in the world and sell it in the United States at the lowest price. A single cook could press 100,000 pills a day, with a production cost of pennies and an exponentially higher sale value. This empire was built on unimaginable violence. Accusations from the US Department of Justice paint a gruesome picture. Los Chapitos tested the potency of their fentanyl batches on kidnapped individuals, injecting them with the drug until they died of an overdose. They are also accused of feeding their enemies to their pet tigers. This criminal innovation transformed Ovidio. El Ratan became a baron of poison. By flooding the United States with a drug 50 times more potent than heroin, causing over 100,000 overdose deaths a year, he ceased to be Mexico's problem. He became a national security crisis for the world's greatest power. The US Department of Justice unsealed formal charges against him for continuing criminal enterprise, fentanyl importation, possession of machine guns, and money laundering. The hunt had begun. Ovidio had become so rich and so dangerous that his capture became a geopolitical priority. The humiliation of 2019 would not be forgotten. On January 5, 2023, the Mexican state returned for Ovidio Guzmán. But this time, there would be no retreat. The operation was the culmination of 6 months of intelligence and surveillance work, which also involved US agencies under the so-called Operation Paisano. The government had learned its lesson. The operation was not launched in the dense urban center of Culiacan, but in the rural community of Jesus Maria, on the outskirts of the city, where the armed forces could deploy their full power, and the power they unleashed was overwhelming. Hundreds of special forces and National Guard members surrounded the area, but the crucial difference came from the air. Black Hawk helicopter gunships opened fire with high-caliber machine guns to suppress the Chapo's security ring. The cartel tried to repeat its 2019 strategy. Violence erupted again, with blockades and coordinated attacks throughout the city. Sicarios fired on a passenger plane preparing for takeoff at the Culiacan airport, sowing panic. But this time, the state was willing to pay the price in blood. The battle was fierce. By the end of the day, the toll was brutal. 10 soldiers lost their lives, along with 19 alleged cartel members. The operation was a success. Ovidio Guzmán was captured, extracted by a military helicopter, and immediately transferred to Mexico City. Hours later, he entered the maximum security prison of El Altiplano, the same prison from which his father had escaped years before. The operation was not just an arrest, it was an act of reaffirmation by the state. It was carried out days before a visit from US President Joe Biden, a diplomatic gesture to show that Mexico was serious about fighting fentanyl. The political will had changed. The cost of capturing Ovidio, however high, was necessary to restore lost credibility. Ovidio Guzmán's empire of violence did not end in a shootout, but in a labyrinth of corridors and courtrooms. 8 months after his capture, on September 15, 2023, he was extradited to the United States. With no injunctions to stop it, he was put on a plane to Chicago to face the justice system. His father could never defeat Dot at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Chicago. He became inmate number 7284748. The charges against him were staggering: leading a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiring to traffic fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine on a massive scale, money laundering, and use of weapons of war. The main charge carried a mandatory life sentence. After an initial plea of not guilty, the defense strategy took a 180-degree turn. In a move that shook the foundations of the narco world, Ovidio Guzmán reached an agreement with prosecutors. He pleaded guilty to 4 of the most serious charges, admitting his role as a high-ranking leader in the world's largest drug trafficking conspiracy. The final image is one of devastating irony. The man who commanded an army that brought a state to its knees, now standing in an orange prison uniform before a federal judge. His war was over. His story shows that, in the fight against transnational cartels, the ultimate weapon is not always a bullet, but bureaucracy, extradition treaties, and the relentless weight of the law. By pleading guilty, the feared Chapo became a potential intelligence asset, a piece in a much larger game. The narco myth, glorified in ballads that celebrate death before dishonor, dissolved into the pragmatic reality of a plea deal. It was a silent, calculated surrender, the anticlimactic end of one of the most violent narcos in modern history. Thank you for staying until the end. Behind every video are hours of research to bring you the complete story. If you value that effort, the best way to support us is by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. See you in the next investigation.